Hi, this is a mini lecture on plate tectonics. Plate tectonics, what is it? Let's consider the word that makes the name, plate and tectonics. Like much of the vocabulary in the earth sciences, the name is rather self-explanatory. The first word, plate, refers to an individual piece of a lithosphere, which we call a plate. The second word, tectonics, refers to the global assembling of the structure of the lithosphere. In other words, how the lithosphere is put together. Why does plate tectonics happen? Earth is unique in our solar system in that it is the only planetary body we know of for certain that has active plate tectonics. So why is this the case? After all, there are about 200 planetary bodies. Well, Earth's core is still very hot, about as hot as the surface of the sun. This heat that is perpetually rising from the core is trying to escape into space. But the Earth's rigid outer shell, the lithosphere, acts as a barrier. But this barrier is only so strong, and eventually the rising heat splits the lithosphere apart in a process called rifting, allowing the heat to escape. The rifting has caused the lithosphere to break into about 20 individual pieces, which we call lithospheric or tectonic plates. Let's consider a hard-boiled egg as an analogy. This hard-boiled egg has a cracked shell. An individual piece of shell is a plate, while a line of contact between two plates is what we call a plate boundary. The squishy white of the egg would be the asthenosphere, while the shell would be, of course, the lithosphere. Plate tectonics. Unlike the pieces of shell around the egg, the lithospheric plates are in constant motion around the Earth. This tectonic process creates the structure of Earth's crust and is driven by heat rising up from Earth's very hot core. Think of a pot of boiling water. The water is hottest at the bottom where it's in contact with the heat source. The rising hot water is rising because it is the least dense, but when it gets to the top of the water, away from the heat, it cools, condenses somewhat, making it more dense, and it sinks back down. This creates what we call convection currents. Let's take a look at a pot of boiling oats. Note that the oats are not just sitting, but instead are swirling around because of the convection currents. You can see in the video the oats rising from deep up to the top and then sinking back down. Plate boundaries, where two plates meet and interact. There are three types of plate boundaries: divergent, convergent, and transform. Divergent plate boundaries. Where continental crust is rifting or splitting, this happens as this rising heat that was previously discussed forces the continental crust to rift or split to get, in a sense, out of the way of this rising heat. Over time, with enough rifting, the continental crust will actually get split into two pieces, and a new plate boundary forms. In this case, the rifting has split the continent in two, and a new ocean basin is forming in between the two diverging pieces. Most of Earth's diverging plate boundaries are found along the ocean floor in the middle of the oceans. This is known as the mid-ocean ridge, which stretches around the Earth like the seam on a baseball. Convergent plate boundaries occur where two plates are colliding. There are three types on Earth: where ocean and continental crust converge, where oceanic crust and oceanic crust are converging, or where two pieces of continental crust are converging or colliding. Where ocean crust is involved, subduction happens. Subduction generates magma, which rises to the Earth's surface to create volcanoes. The volcanoes of the continents form in a line parallel to the trench, which we call a continental volcanic arc. If this happens in the ocean, the line of volcanic islands are called the volcanic island arc. Where two continental crust pieces are colliding, the crust is crumpled and folded to make mountains. Transform boundaries are where two pieces of lithosphere or crust are sliding horizontally past one another. Most of these transform boundaries or transform faults occur on the ocean floor along the mid-ocean ridge. But in some cases, the transform faults may cut across a continent. The most famous example of this is the San Andreas Fault. Constructive geologic processes are ultimately driven by plate tectonics. The interaction of plates along plate boundaries drive processes that build up the topography and add new rock to Earth's crust. Constructive geologic processes. These are processes that build up the topography and add new rock to Earth's crust, and are partially responsible for the continual renewal of Earth's relatively young surface. The constructive forces are generated along divergent and convergent plate boundaries. Along divergent boundaries, seafloor spreading continually adds new oceanic crust, building up the ocean floor, or builds new mountains on land. While along convergent plate boundaries, subduction generates magma that rises to Earth's surface to form intrusive or extrusive igneous rock. If two continental crust plates collide, the crust is pushed up to make mountains. In either case, Earth's surface is being built up and or new rock is being added. So this is a quick overview of plate tectonics. You will be learning about some of what was discussed here in more detail through reading your lecture textbook and reading and completing the activities in your lab book. That's it for now.